All right, what's going on, everyone? So quick Iran war update here, and we actually just passed a pretty interesting benchmark. The ceasefire began 41 days ago. That followed 40 days of active hostilities in the war. So the ceasefire has now been going on longer than the fighting portion of this conflict. And I feel that, right? It seems like every day, or at least a couple times a week, we get some sort of notification that a deal is right on the brink of coming through. But here we are, 41 days into the ceasefire, and there's really been no notable progress on that front. I mean, again, we don't know what's happening behind closed doors, but everything public seems to show that no progress has been made at all. In fact, overnight, Iran released, supposedly through Reuters, released their most recent list of demands, and it's the exact same. They haven't backed down at all. They said they want U.S. troops leaving areas close to Iran, the U.S. paying war reparations, lifting all sanctions on Iran, releasing Iran's frozen assets, and ending the U.S. blockade. So again, Iran is presenting that as though they have the upper hand, or at least they can afford to wait the United States out. And maybe they can, but this is leading to a number of analysts here in the United States saying it's time to finish the job. And we've seen countless articles about this in the last couple weeks of people kind of opining on, hey, it's only going to take this, that, or the other thing. And we've got the most recent one from the Wall Street Journal that actually lays out a 3-part plan as to what it will take to finally win the war in Iran. Spoiler alert, it's pretty significant combat operations to include U.S. boots on the ground. Now, starting out, the Wall Street Journal in this article said, quote, Mr. Trump may be able to compel Iran to seek peace, but if not, this time he needs to be willing to follow through on the threat of catastrophic force. That means preparing for a multi-stage operation, including boots on the ground, that forcibly reopens the Strait of Hormuz to accelerate the collapse of the Iranian state. Mr. Trump has a narrow window in which to end this crisis favorably, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and ensure an economic rebound while securing American interests and prestige, but that requires deploying the full spectrum of American power. I feel like we're doing a little bit of the Russia thing here at this point. We're not there yet, but just in the last couple of weeks, we've seen Russian analysts or Russians say, like, gloves off, right? It's time to actually go, and it's very different. Russia has put just about everything they can, minus their nuclear arsenal, into the war in Ukraine. The United States is nowhere near that at all, but it's what makes me think of when I hear, now is the time, take the gloves off. Now, it seemed like that was about to happen overnight. In fact, President Trump issued a statement saying that he had called off strikes because he said, let's see, we've got the Emir of Qatar, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the President of the United Arab Emirates. He listed off all of these different leaders. He said they reached out to him and say, hey, can you hold off on this attack? He said there was a major attack coming because no progress had been made. But all of these leaders throughout the Middle East reached out and said, President Trump, please don't do this, because he said they view that a deal is very close. Look, we've been burned before. I don't know how many times, right? 1, 2, 12 times at this point. We've heard that we're right on the brink of actually getting a deal done. The Iranians, understandably so, don't put a lot of stock in those statements. In fact, from what I've seen, they largely view those as kind of running distraction for what might be U.S. military operation. So let's dive into that. In fact, I should mention, we'll pull up a map here to run through some of these areas. There was an additional report in the Wall Street Journal that senior officials from those countries that were named said, we actually have no idea what you're talking about. Like, what attack was on the verge and who asked President Trump to hold off. So I don't know. Look, it honestly feels like a lot of the breaking news and leaked reports is just made up at this point. So rather difficult to read between the lines when the lines are completely fabricated. But let's get into the 3 different ways that the Wall Street Journal here says the war could be wrapped up in Iran. They say first, and I'm using a live UA map here. So we've got Iran right in the middle of the screen. This is going to be the focus point, of course, with the Persian Gulf just to the south, and then the Strait of Hormuz. We're actually going to end up talking about the Bab el-Mandeb Strait off the Red Sea here as well. But they say first, the U.S. should prepare a major series of strikes against Iranian communications, transportation, and other infrastructure, while concurrently unleashing the Israeli Air Force against remaining Iranian industries. Iran's metallurgical industry, a pillar of its state-backed economy, is badly damaged. Coordinating with Israel, the Israeli attacks on these targets while disrupting Iranian military movement would cripple virtually every industry for Iran except oil production. I think that is doable, and that's kind of how we're going to address these today. Is like the U.S. military could do that. We have the capacity to do that. It would likely take a while. By all accounts, the Iranian air defense is pretty heavily degraded right now. It's not gone. still exists. I mean, if you recall, right before the ceasefire went into place, Iran shot down a U.S. fighter jet, F-15, over Iranian airspace, and then an A-10 actually as well that's taking part in the search and rescue operation. So air defense still exists, but it's heavily degraded. So if the United States wanted to go in with Israel and just hammer everything that remains from the Iranian economy and transportation and communication sector, we could. That's not an overnight operation. You would probably have to expect this to take 2, 3, 4 weeks minimum. That's a lot of resources, a lot of bombs, a lot of munitions being utilized to have the desired effect. The other side of that then is, does that effect actually accomplish the objective? I don't know. We don't know. Because at this point, what we have not seen is the Iranian people having the ability or desire somewhere in there to rise up and overthrow the regime. There's no internal group ready to take over and push the IRGC out. So what happens if the entire economy collapses? Maybe you get some sort of domestic, domestic group rising up and taking over. Maybe not, because we haven't seen that so far. But anyways, that's just stage one, doable by the U.S. and Israeli military. Stage two gets kind of tricky here. They say 2 additional operations would target the Strait of Hormuz and the Iranian uranium storage in Isfahan. So we'll zoom in here real quick. Strait of Hormuz, of course, very challenging sector here with very few ships still moving through today. And then Isfahan, just on the outskirts of, or just here, south, not outskirts, but south of Tehran a little bit. See if we can get them both on the map here. Isfahan right on the bottom of the screen, Tehran here. Some of the major nuclear facilities are in Isfahan. They say the former would be principally against Qeshm Island in concert with United Arab Emirates, who has attacked Iran many times during the war. Qeshm and its surrounding islands are key to the strait. The latter operation should aim to seize nuclear material. By rescuing a downed pilot in early April, the U.S. demonstrated it can operate in the area effectively. I think, I'm not going to hold back here, I think this is completely misguided in multiple ways. Like the first one, got it, a lot of U.S. air power. Now it's just kind of saying things and pointing at a map. There's no indication that putting a couple additional naval resources or even boots on the ground around the Strait of Hormuz will reopen the strait. Remember, this is an issue where we need to get the shipping companies and the insurers to feel confident to move through at all. Right now they need to go like 20x the rate that they're moving through before this is actually alleviated. Iran's drones and long-range munitions have the ability to be staged essentially anywhere in the country and still range this area. So, if we lock down this coastline, lock down these islands, like, sure, it eliminates some of the threat, like from fast boats and such. But I think we still have quite a ways to go before the Strait of Hormuz is effectively opened via military means. Again, this goes back, and we've talked about it on this channel multiple times. The issue with opening the Strait of Hormuz is not necessarily military, it's regime change. It's that the Iranian regime, as it sits today, views this as a lever that they can pull, and they're willing to strike commercial vessels. That is the problem. We can't change geography. We might be able to change the regime, although not quite at this point. The second part here they're talking about is going into Isfahan, middle of Iran here, to take out the nuclear material. This is estimated to be around 11 tons of highly enriched uranium, They point to the rescue operation taking the F-15 pilots out a couple months ago as evidence that we'd be able to pull this off. He says, by rescuing a downed pilot in early April, the U.S. demonstrated it can operate in the area effectively. That is apples and oranges. That is such a bad comparison to make here. So a couple things. The pilots, the only people that knew where the pilots were was the United States, maybe Israel, not Iran. Like, we remember they were looking all over the place, sometimes in the wrong area, trying to figure out where these pilots were. So we were able to put together an operation to sneak into Iran and exfil these 2 pilots when only we knew where they were. The nuclear material is the exact opposite. Like, maybe it's dispersed, but if it's just at Isfahan and Natanz and a couple other areas, that means Iran can just watch that area and know where we're going. It's completely different. On top of that, the rescue operation was, arguably, and I can't wait for more details to come out on this, but it was arguably the most, the most daring special operations mission in our lifetime, if not ever. I mean, it was crazy what went into that. But that was all done very quickly, essentially in one period of darkness. Like from the time the sun went down one night to the time the sun came up the next day. That was when that operation played out. It might have gone a little bit longer. That's not what you have to do for going into Esfahan or Natanz or something. You're talking about digging into areas that have been buried by U.S. military strikes. So this isn't a matter of like a squad from Delta or a Ranger platoon jumping on the ground and going and grabbing a couple suitcases full of uranium and getting back on the bird. These areas are going to be heavily protected. Iran is watching them, and we've got to get heavy machinery in there to even get into the underground locations. It is a very, very significant operation. I do think we have the ability to pull that off. However, it would require an understanding that we would probably suffer pretty significant losses. Like entirely likely we lose aircraft and or aircraft full of our personnel trying to carry that out. And I think it's very unlikely that we'd be able to carry something out like that and with 100% certainty get all of the highly enriched uranium. So to be able to say like, well, we got the pilots out so we can go get 11 tons of enriched uranium, I think is to be blunt, just not a very good comparison. He says, finally, the United States should attack remaining Iranian tanker capacity inside the Strait of Hormuz. The faster we destroy Iran's floating oil storage, the more the country's economy will feel the squeeze. Like, seize them, maybe. We got a lot of Marines over there at this point, and it seems like that has been somewhat effective, taking over some of these Iranian-flagged vessels. But straight up sinking, like destroying the vessels in the Persian Gulf, like, you're talking about the United States initiating the largest, I would say probably the largest ecological disaster in history. Right now, it's estimated that Iran has around 39 tankers in the Persian Gulf. If we sink 39 vessels, many of them loaded to the brim with oil and other chemicals, are you kidding me? like it would make the Persian Gulf effectively unusable. Like, I don't know how many years or even generations it would destroy this area for. On top of that, you've got the desalination plants that millions of people rely on for their drinking water. If we sink 39 ships full of oil in this small area, those desalination plants are going to get clogged up, and you're risking millions of people possibly not having clean drinking water. So, no, I don't think sinking 39 Iranian oil vessels in the Persian Gulf is necessarily a step towards a accomplishment of this goal. But we're seeing more and more of this, right? This is becoming kind of the norm in the last couple weeks, is more people popping up saying what we need to do is just A, B, C, and D. And look, I don't know. It's complicated. There's a lot of things that Iran can still do. We're in a very difficult spot at this point. I don't think it's accurate to throw out one solution and say this is the thing. We just have to knock it out of the park and we'll be done. In fact, there was some pushback, not directly to this, but the New York Times ran an article talking about how Iran might respond next time should the United States carry out further attacks. And I think it's pretty spot on. Like, it passes the common sense test here, right? So they quoted Hamidreza Azizi from the German Institute for International Security Affairs. He says, if war breaks out again, Iranian leaders expect fighting to be short but high intensity, including coordinated heavy strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure. They say that is in contrast to the initial phase of the war that they expected to go on for months and months and months. So they were looking at, from day one, they were like, we have to prepare like we're going to get daily strikes or hourly strikes for the next 4 months. This time, however, they're viewing it as this is going to be very short. Days, maybe weeks at most. They say if any new round of fighting, Iran may fire off tens or hundreds of missiles per day to effectively confront the enemy and also change the calculation on the other side. Go back to the map here, show some of the areas that have been on the receiving end of Iranian missiles. Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE. I don't know that Oman really took any hits. Saudi Arabia as well. He says this will leave the Gulf Arab nations having to brace for intensified attacks on their energy infrastructure. Striking Gulf oil fields, refineries, and ports is one of the most potent ways for Iran to inflict pain on the global economy and put pressure on Mr. Trump. If the damage is major enough, it could suck countries like the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia even deeper into a war that many Gulf leaders have sought to avoid. Again, hard to tell how much of this reporting has been genuine or speculation, but it does seem like a lot of these Gulf states have been nervous about the Iranian attacks on their infrastructure, understandably so. And in fact, when we kicked off Project Freedom, now it was like 2 weeks ago, one of the reasons presented as to why we had to call it off was when the UAE, specifically this port here, the Fujairah port, was hit by Iran in response to Project Freedom, General Kane and Secretary Hegseth brushed that off as under the threshold of violating the ceasefire. So the reporting there was that some of our allies in the region were like, wait a second, are you actually not going to be defending us like this? You're not going to be providing the defense while you're carrying out these operations in the region. And again, according to that reporting, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait shut off our ability to utilize their airspace or bases within their country for that operation. So it would seem logical that a lot of our Gulf Arab partners are worried about Iran carrying out further strikes against their infrastructure. On top of that, Azizi says, quote, Iran could also try to exert control over the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a narrow waterway connecting the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden, through which 1/10 of global trade passes. Not that far away to the hot spot of a year and a half, 2 years ago. So this is the Bab el-Mandeb Strait off the coast of Yemen. Yemen, of course, home to the Houthis, an Iranian proxy and a group that, at various points over the last couple of years has effectively shut down the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. This is the area that they target. So very similar to the Strait of Hormuz. It's narrow. There's not a lot of room to maneuver. It's very difficult for anyone to put a warship in there to effectively defend against incoming drones, missiles, and fast boats. We've not seen the Houthis directly involved. I think they've fired 2 or 3 times drones at Israel, but essentially they've not done anything down here to try to shut off the flow of shipping. The author here is arguing that Iran may have seen the benefit of shutting off the Strait of Hormuz, and they might say, hey, next time if the United States and Israel ratchet things up, we're just going to sling a drone or two via the Houthis. I mean, to be honest, Iran could even range something in this area, not hit a moving target, but they would be able to at least put some drones in this area to make some of the shipping companies and insurers question operations there. And that number is still not recovered. It's still significantly down from where it was before the Houthis started attacking. So just kind of a back pocket is the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, on top of course, Iran carrying out attacks against all of their Gulf neighbors. So we'll see. It does feel to me the constant we're on the verge of making a deal seems made up, for lack of a better term. I don't know if we're trying to posture or what it is, but there's been no indication from the first time that was presented that anything has changed from the Iranian negotiating position. There's been a lot of talk that Iranian oil fields are going to get shut in. They're going to run out of capacity. I'm not an expert in that field. The reading that I've done on that is that it's going to take far longer than we thought, and it might not even be possible, and that Iran has largely dialed back their production to match what they have still remaining in terms of storage capacity. So that's not like a 48-hour fix. It's weeks, months, maybe even longer before kind of shutting off Iranian oil exports has a direct effect on their oil industry. On top of that, it looks like a handful of ships continue to transit the blockade. Tanker Trackers over on X, I think, does a great job. I'll link their work in the description below. But using satellite imagery and the whatever the system is, AIS, I think, to track the actual ship movements, they said there's been a fair number of Iranian ships that have sanctioned Iranian ships that have made it through that blockade so far. So it's hard to see a good solution for the United States in this conflict in the very short term. I think it could take a while, and I'm not certain we have that strategy laid out quite yet, but Wall Street Journal has one. Boots on the ground, kick off operations into Isfahan and secure the Strait of Hormuz. Probably a little easier said than done. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.